I think one of the most endearing aspects of baseball, and one of, something that I think so many people talk about when you talk about baseball, is it's a very generational sport. It is a sport more so than any other that is passed down.
Is that as a fan, as a player? What do you mean exactly?
Every kid, so many kids, I can't say every kid, but so many kids have a memory of going back outside, even if their dad isn't a baseball guy, going out in the backyard and having a catch.
The catch, yeah. The famous.
That's like a thing that everybody, like so many people do. And I think that because of that, and for so many, when you follow a baseball team, you follow the team your dad loves so often,
That's very true. Although not always, but I think most of the time.
I think most people would follow the team that their dad does. So many fans are talking. You talk about the players that you watched when you were young in comparison to the players that I watched when I was young. It's so much a sport. And because there's such a history aspect to it, and it's so well transcribed and noted down, it's so easy to teach everybody the history of the game. And so it becomes a game that is, as I said, very passed down from generation to generation. And I mean, that even goes as far as baseball skill when you think about it, because there's a lot of fathers and sons that have played baseball together.
Right, and in terms of it being like more than other sports, you think, and again, there's probably more players because baseball's been around longer or whatnot, so you have this generational aspect, as you say.
Well, I mean, how many father and son combos do you think have played in the major leagues?
Oh, has to be a couple of hundred?
Over 250.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Now, granted, you've got a ton of years and a ton of guys that have played baseball, but still, 250 is a lot.
And this being our Father's Day episode, so we're recording this on Father's Day weekend. I guess we could have dropped it the week before Father's Day, but we're going to drop it right after Father's Day.
It's a big deal.
That doesn't really matter. And in doing the research for this, looking at fathers and sons, it surprised me that the fathers, most of the time, far outpace their sons in terms of their baseball prowess and their careers. There's a few times where the son outdid his father, but for the most part, so it made me think about.
Well, I mean, something that supports that is the father, the guy that has the lowest ERA for any father-son combination is a guy named Ed Walsh, who has the lowest career ERA.
Ed Walsh was a Hall of Fame pitcher.
1.82. Unfortunately, his son has the unfortunate distinction of being the son with the highest ERA of any son that's played baseball at 5.92.
And that's,
5.57.
So, it like we before the podcast we talked about, it's great if you're Barry Bonds. So the number one father and son combination is pretty universally said to be Barry Bonds and his dad, Bobby Bonds. We've made the case at times that Bobby Bonds is almost a Hall of Famer, right? He's right there. And between the two of them, they have more home runs than by a far margin. I think they have
granted, that's because
home
Bobby
runs.
has 762. They have
Barry,
1,094.
They have 1,094.
Right, but that's very much helped by Barry.
Barry has his 762, and
Bobby has 330.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Bobby was the first guy to have 300 steals and 300 homers.
Now, there's only one father-son combo that's hit 50 home runs in a season, both of them.
In one father-son that has hit the 50 home runs in a season. Did Prince Fielder hit 50 home runs?
You are correct. Okay. It is Prince and Cecil.
But Cecil Fielder and Prince, even better than that. This is great. So their entire careers, okay, they each hit 319 home runs. Exact same number. And so and I would say that Prince was the better ball player between the two of them. Neither one of them could field very well.
No.
And neither one of them was a great base runner because they're big guys, but hitters, yeah. And I think Prince was a pretty good average hitter. So I think if you're the kid growing up, right, we were talking about this, when you're 6 and you're in the dugout with all the major leaguers, you go to spring training and you meet all the players, you probably want to be nothing else but a baseball player because that's just like the most amazing thing. This is what your dad does. This is what I want to do.
Right, exactly. You grow up in the in and around the dugout when you're. Keep going. When you're a kid, you grow up, you learn what it's like to be part of that. I couldn't see how you wouldn't. I mean, if you're Ken Griffey Jr., how are you not?
Right, you were in there when the Big Red Machine was going on. Like, so you're getting the whole championship. You've got one of the greatest teams of all time. I want to be a baseball player more than anything.
Exactly. That's going to be the thing that really keeps you going and keeps you focused.
I think they're the only guys to play together, right? The Griffies, because they played on the same team, and I think they both homered in like one game.
Right. I think so. There might be somebody else that's floating around, but those are the only two that I could think. And then you think, I don't know if there's too many Hall of Fame pairs where both the father and the son are in the Hall of Fame.
I don't think that has happened at all.
I think we've got one guy playing right now that might be the first one to break it. Because his dad's already in.
Vlad Jr.
I think Vlad
A long way for Vlad Jr. to go.
I think in terms of being on the right track, the guy is playing at a level where he could get a Hall of Fame nod one day. And the fact that his father's on... Because the first thing is, the dad has to make the Hall of Fame.
Right.
That's the hard part, is that the dad has to make it.
He can't go back and make it up later on.
Right. If Fernando Tatis Jr. becomes a Hall of Famer, it doesn't matter. Fernando Tatis is never going to be a Hall of Famer.
MLB did a whole background on the greatest father-son duos, and so we mentioned Barry Bonds and his dad Bobby, the Griffies, obviously, and the Alous always come to mind, right? And I told you the whole thing about the Alous, the three brothers playing the outfield for the Giants at one time back in the 60s, which to me still is amazing.
And they also became one of the only ones to be also managers as well, in addition joining the Boones and the Bells when Luis Rojas...
Right, because he's the son-in-law, or the son. He's Felipe's son.
Right.
He's Felipe's son. You're right. And so, but people forget more recently that Moises almost had the best career of them all. I think Felipe outdid him by a couple of B-War points, but Moises was a hell of a ball player, and none of them are Hall of Famers, by the way. None of the Alous.
We've had a bunch of managers. So you've had the Bells. You had Buddy Bell and David Bell both manage. You have the Boones with Bob and Aaron. You have the Macs with Connie and Earl.
So go back to the Boones for a second. It's not just Bob and Aaron. So obviously Brett is Aaron's brother.
Right.
Their grandfather, Ray Boone.
But did he manage?
He didn't manage.
But
three generations.
Three generations.
That's pretty cool. It is,
You also had the Sisslers with George and Dick Sisler also managed, and the Skinners, Bob and Joel Skinner.
And Mel Stottlemyre Jr. is a pitching coach, and his dad was a pitching coach, but Mel was a very good pitcher, and it surprised me how good a pitcher his son Todd was, Mel Jr.'s brother, so they have real major league pedigree in that family. Jose Cruz and Jose Cruz Jr. I was like, Cruz.
Jose Cruz Jr. never really developed into the player we hoped he was going to develop into.
Sandy Alomar Sr., you probably don't know much about, although you knew that the Alomars were a baseball family because his brother, his son, Sandy Alomar Jr., was a good catcher for the
Sandy Alomar Sr.
Cleveland.
Made an all-star team,
right.
But I think both of his sons would be considered better players.
I think you're right.
And Roberto's obviously a Hall of Famer.
So that, there's that. And Dizzy and Steve Trout, I didn't know that Steve Trout was Dizzy Trout's son. So
no relation to Mike.
No, exactly. And Flash Gordon and his son D.
Right. Again, people don't know that about that. And then there's also Nick Gordon, who just came up recently playing last in 2021 for the Twins.
Right. He's got a bunch of kids that are playing Major League Baseball, right? Or at least two of them.
Yes.
And so I think the kids have this pressure on them, right, once they start playing. I remember Pete Rose Jr., right, when he was coming up. And, his dad, would say what you want about him, but he was the guy with the most hits. And so there's naturally that kind of, is this a chip off the old block? Is he going to hit like his old man? And Pete Rose Jr. could never do it. The pressure of having to be the best singles hitter of all time was too much.
I think you're in a really good situation when your dad was just kind of an average player, because then you were exposed to it, but you're not going to have nearly the same level of expectations. Like it's got to be really hard being Bronny. LeBron's kid coming up. He's going to USC to play basketball next season. And to be that kid with the weight of the expectations that are on you, when it's really not fair at all, that's what's impressive about Vlad Guerrero Jr. is he's got a lot of expectations on him. And he's got two guys on his team. And I think it's interesting that you have three sons on that team. And I wonder if that helps them at all. And that you've got Dante Bichette, Kevin Biggio, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. all in the Blue Jays together. And that those three guys probably understand.
Bo Bichette.
Right.
Yeah, and Bo Bichette's having a heck of a year. Now, Dante was not close to being a Hall of Famer, but had a crazy, stupid year.
He was a four-time All-Star.
He had a crazy, stupid that 1 year in Colorado that he had where he hit like 350 and did everything.
And Craig was a Hall of Famer, obviously, and Kevin's not
Yeah,
really
he hasn't had a good
he hasn't
season this
figured
year.
it out yet.
A couple of guys that we've talked about in the past that have fathers that played where the son is better. So I came up with Bobby Crosby and his dad Ed Crosby. Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't have to look up Ed Crosby. I think they just was like, okay, so Bobby Crosby was a pretty good player. You think of Bing Crosby, and then Michael Brantley. I didn't know that his dad Mickey Brantley was a major league ball player.
I didn't know that either.
But Michael is the far better player.
Generally,
obviously,
if we know one player and we've never even heard of the other guy, that kind of tells you something.
I got one for you, and you watched him play. His dad was a major league relief pitcher for the Yankees and the Oakland A's, I think, as well. His dad is Ron Davis, Ike Davis.
Really?
Ike Davis's dad.
I didn't know
Major League. Ron Davis wore glasses when guys didn't wear glasses.
And we've already mentioned him on this podcast, but Fernando Tatis Jr. is already a much better player than his dad was.
But his dad had the 4 home runs in one game?
No. It was the 2 grand slams.
2 grand slams in one inning. You're right. He didn't have the...
He might have had a game where
I think he had 4 home runs too.
He might have had it, but his big thing is the two grand slams in an inning. And for Tatis Jr. is having an unbelievable season.
Yeah. He's only played 40 games or so at this point. He's got 14 or 15 homers already as we're going in.
MVP numbers in that time.
So guys that are playing right now in the major leagues whose dad played, I took a look and I came up with
how many do we have?
I think about not quite 20.
It's pretty impressive that
at one time
there's 20 guys.
These are active players,
right? And for the most part, most of them play, from what I understand. You don't have a lot of guys.
All I looked up was, did the guy play an inning this year?
Right. But most of these guys are players. There's not a lot of these guys that are kind of just like on. You don't have like nepo guys as much anymore. Where back in the day, I think you were occasionally more likely to get like a son onto a team just because he was the son.
Well, I think guys like Dale Berra, who was a marginal major league player, got a lot of chances, and he had. If there's a new documentary out about Yogi Berra made by his granddaughter Lindsay, which is "It Ain't Over Till It's Over," and they basically have a whole thing about Yogi telling Dale when he had this whole drug problem back in there that we're going to disown you. Your mother's not going to talk to you. Your family's going to, like, whoa, hard stuff. Dale dropped it like it hasn't taken anything in 37 years. So his dad got through to him. But I just think that's such an interesting story of a father and a son who wanted so much to be Yogi, Berra and be like Yogi, and he
I just realized there's another father-son combo we hadn't talked about that's playing this year, and that's Roger and Cody Clemens.
Right. He's one of my guys on my list.
We got Alan Jack Leiter.
And no matter what Cody Clemens could ever do, no matter what.
That's got to be rough.
Yeah.
It's one thing when you're like it's why to me Vlad Jr. is so impressive because you're it's
right. You got a chance. You got a chance.
You got a chance. Kevin, that's got if you're if you're Bo Bichette, your dad was good, but if anything, time has gone on. People have more and more denigrated your father as a
player. Yeah.
They're not a big fan of him. They go, look at him, he's terrible.
He's got like an awful career WAR.
It's like
Dante,
barely positive despite being a career 300 hitter.
Yeah.
And so if you're Bo, you have a chance to be a much greater player than him overall. If you're Kevin or you're Vlad Jr., your best hope is to be an equal player to your father because he's already reached the pinnacle.
So did you know, here's my list, Pudge Rodriguez's son, Derek, came up in 2018, is still in the major leagues.
I don't know what's more surprising, that Pudge has got a son or his son's name is Derek.
Right. That doesn't seem like...
Right. I would never guess Derek.
Go from Ivan to Derek. Okay, so the Tatises, the Guerreros, Cal Quantrill's dad, Paul. You might have had... You've heard of Paul. Was a good pitcher. We mentioned the Biggios, the Bichettes. Brian Harvey, the relief pitcher for the Angels. Probably just a bit before you...
No relation to Matt.
No relation to Matt. Hunter Harvey is in the major leagues right now. Fernando Hernandez, I did not know him. His son, Jonathan Hernandez, I do know, who's playing right now. So sometimes the kid, and you're like, oh, his dad played Major League Baseball, and
that's very common, especially because you have a lot of names like Hernandez and Rodriguez, where you're not just going to immediately assume.
Oh, that's Keith's kid.
Keith's kid.
No, it's not. It's not even his grandchild. Gary Varsho, I remember him as a pro. His son Dalton Varsho is a fine ball player, but I think Dalton is already might have supplanted Gary or. We're
going to assume every Johnson is the son. There's a lot of Johnsons, just because we're not Randy's kid.
Luis Garcia of the Astros. His dad is Luis Garcia. So
that's just confusing.
Well,
please make him a junior.
I guess he's a junior. Charlie Hayes. You ever heard of Brian Hayes?
Oh, okay.
So Charlie Hayes. Charlie Hayes played for the Yankee team that won the World Series first in 1990. In those Yankees, 96. I think it was the only year he played there.
Okay.
He caught the final out at third base. That's just all I remember
That
about.
was Boris.
No, Scott Brocious. No, I think it was Charlie Hayes who caught the last out of that World Series.
Interesting. In 96.
96. So
because in 95 they
lost to the Braves. No, the Braves
lost
beat
to the Indians.
The then Indians, now Guardians.
Now Guardians.
I was yeah. Phil Nevin's son, Tyler Nevin. So Phil Nevin is managing, obviously, right now, doing a pretty darn good job.
Nevin was a pretty good.
Nevin, I remember him as a college ball player. I even remember. I think he went to Northridge. Why I remember he went to Cal State
It's a
Northridge.
very specific reason.
Yeah. But he was like a really good college ball player.
I remember he had a couple pretty good seasons.
Never was. He came out as a terror and from college, like he was going to dominate at the major league level.
And he was never quite that.
Right. Larry Sheets played in the 80s. I barely remember the guy's name. Gavin Sheets, obviously, of the White Sox. Not Ben Sheets, right. Not Short Sheets. Bobby Witt and Bobby Witt Jr., obviously. Bobby Witt was a fine major league pitcher. Fastball, once have a couple of good years with Oakland.
I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. is kind of the guy for that Royals.
Oh, they sure hope so.
They really hope he's their next superstar.
In fact, we did our next episode is going to be the KC deep dive, and we're kind of laying a lot on Bobby Witt Jr. because I think the Royals have as well going, this is our future. Geronimo Pena and his son Jeremy Pena, who came up last year with the Houston Astros and had an amazing year, making people forget about Carlos Correa, which is unbelievable. Mike Capel and Connor. Well, I know Connor Capel is pitching right now. Mike Capel, okay.
Their cousin Clint?
His dad played. That's Capella. He's the basketball player, right? Not a cappella. Mark Guthrie was a fine left-handed relief pitcher.
Mark Guthrie, yeah.
Dalton Guthrie, obviously, pitching now in the major leagues. Brian Turang, most recently, and Bryce Turang. Okay, Bryce Turang is I think first year. He just came up this year. He's gotten to two games. I know the name, but I didn't know that his dad played. Yeah, exactly. Lance McCullers, who just is out for the season now. Yep. So I think
his dad played baseball.
His dad was a good ball player.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was a good pitcher for the.
Both pitchers injured. A big curveball too, like his son.
I don't remember that. I have to say. Did you know that Edwin Escobar's dad played Major League Baseball?
Really?
Jose Escobar. I didn't either.
Eduardo or?
No, his dad, Jose.
No, Eduardo. You said Edwin Escobar.
I'm sorry, Edwin Escobar.
Okay, Edwin. So
not
Eduardo.
You're
okay.
right.
I was thinking our Eduardo Escobar
No.
on the Mets.
Excuse me, Jock Peterson's dad, Stu Peterson.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that. And Mark Leiter Jr., and his dad, Mark Leiter, Al Leiter's brother, Mark Leiter Sr., was a major league pitcher as well.
So Jack is
Al's son.
And
doesn't get on this list because Jack hasn't thrown a pitch in the major leagues
yet.
He isn't
in the major leagues yet, right? They've been holding him down because they don't want to bring him up yet. But his brother's kid is in the major leagues.
Right. And doing very well. I think he's like the closer for the Cubs.
Which is probably confusing people greatly.
Right. Because people don't remember Mark Leiter Sr.
No, and they're just going to assume, and they also know Al Leiter has a kid that's a heralded prospect.
Right. He's the guy who's supposed to be, number one draft choice.
He was the number one draft choice. He's supposed to be the guy in the Ranger organization, I believe.
Yeah. So, he really impressed me this year because they just had this the Hall of Fame inductions at Citi Field for some Met players, including Al Leiter.
And he was there.
And Jack Leiter came in from the minor leagues and flew in to be there to see his dad do that. And that kind of stuff I really love to have the Leiters get on the podcast if I ever could, because I really want to ask guys like that, do you guys ever watch baseball together, number one, when you're not at the park? So they're at a family gathering, right? It's summertime. Somehow the All-Star break happens, right? And so they all get together. Do they talk about baseball? Do they watch baseball?
Postseason, if you're together and the World Series is going on, do you watch it? If obviously Jack's not in it.
Right. What do they, or are they just so tired of baseball that they want to get it out of the family conversations?
Watch it recreationally.
Your mom's going to scream. She hears another thing about baseball. For God's sake, stop already. So I think that could happen. I think the most interesting thing was that the sons rarely achieve what their fathers did. And when you think about it, like you said, it makes sense because it's really hard. You have all this added pressure on you because your dad wasn't merely a good ball player. He was maybe a Hall of Fame ball player, and so you just like, how do you make that happen?
How do you overcome that kind of gap in a sense? But not necessarily gap, but just that level of pressure you're going to naturally put on yourself, because it's really not going to be coming from other people that much. Just once you're above a certain level, people aren't going to go, oh well, it's Pete Rose's kid, we were really expecting it. It's going to be an internal thing where you're just going to feel it because you want to live up to what your dad, and you're going to want to surpass what he did.
And so often it doesn't happen, right? So we're not talking about all the guys who are sons of major league ball players. I remember I mentioned Lee Mazzilli. Remember when the old Mets, the heartthrob Lee Mazzilli. Well, Lee Mazzilli Jr. Was trying to be a pro. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't make it at the major league level, and as much as he wanted to, and he played for a long time.
Mookie Wilson's kid,
Preston Wilson, did play in the major league. I think he might have been his stepson or something. I don't know if he was.
And Preston Wilson was a pretty heralded prospect, but he never developed into.
That's because he was with the Mets, and then he ended up going to the Marlins, being pretty good actually
for like one season
after he left the Mets. So one guy who's managed to avoid the pressure of this is because he switched sports. So he said, you know what? Baseball's too hard. I'm going to go to the easier sport. I'm going to play football. My dad's a major league player. My name's Patrick Mahomes.
I'm going to go play football.
Because Pat Mahomes was a good major league pitcher, pitched for the Mets as well late in his career. Patrick Mahomes, who also played baseball for a long time,
who was talked about, who could have been a baseball.
I think like Kyler Murray, one of those guys who could have played either. He made the right choice.
He's the best quarterback in football.
So, but one way of avoiding the pressure of being a major leaguer.
And then Patrick Mahomes' kid is going to have the problem if he wants to play football, where it's like, oh, congratulations, you're following your father, who might be one of the best to ever play the position.
And what do you think it was like for Pat Mahomes when his son comes up to him and says one day, Dad, I don't want to play baseball.
I want to play football.
I want to play football. Oh, but you're going to get your head beat in, and you play baseball. It's much easier on your body. Maybe not.
I want to play football.
Maybe not. So yeah, I think the pressure for these guys sometimes causes them to choose another sport, even to say, and that's happened before, right? Where the guy ends up going to something else. I remember in tennis, Yannick Noah's son Joakim Noah became a basketball player. And why didn't he become a tennis player? Because he's 7 feet tall. That's why.
Until he showed up and played for the Knicks, then he got to step back.
So Father's Day, we think about the guys that are playing. We think about the brothers. We did a whole episode on brothers, but I think the most amazing family, like I said before, is the Boone family, to have 3 generations, and I think that might be, I'm sure I'm going to be wrong about this, right? The only 3-generation baseball family where all of them played at the major league level. I can't think of another one.
The Harristons.
Oh, you're right. Right.
Scott,
you're right.
Jerry, and their grandson, now his grandson Jerry Jr.
Right, but there wasn't anybody older than Jerry. Jerry Harrison Sr. was the patriarch.
Right, and then there was Scott.
You're right, I did see that.
Jerry Harrison Jr., who's Scott's son. There was 3 generations there.
Very good, very good. So, and we could think about who is better things and all that. I don't really want to get into, that aspect. We just, all you would do is look at it as, who had the better war, and then we get into a whole stupid discussion on B war and F war and stuff.
Right, and I think that's ultimately unimportant when it kind of comes to this discussion, because I think what makes it so cool when you have all of these guys is that, in a way, it was, they passed the game down to all of their kids, and whether or not they were successful, I think to all of those fathers probably didn't matter, because for them, the career win was the moment the kid stepped on the field and played that game.
How great is it for the dad, right, too, to be there? And so Cody Bellinger's dad, Clay Bellinger, was a pitcher in the major league, and just to watch his son win the Rookie of the Year that first year that he came up,
right,
and go to the World Series and all that stuff. That feeling,
Right, especially because it's one thing I can imagine it's one thing if you're a parent, but if you were a parent that also played in the major leagues, and you can truly appreciate just how difficult whatever it is they're doing is. Vlad made the Hall of Fame, but I imagine for Vlad Sr., watching Vlad Jr. make the Hall of Fame would be almost a more impactful moment for him than when he made it himself.
Well, certainly now that your playing days are over,
right,
you can look back on it going, that really gives you the gratification because you're not going to play it anymore. So hopefully you won't live too vicariously through your kid. Like all the people when I was running the Little League and all that stuff, you'd be in the meetings and, my son is a really good player. He's got to be on the best team with the best coach, the best players. He's 7. He's 7 years
He
old.
sometimes picks the grass in the
every
outfield.
parent out there at that level thinks, I got another, Mike Trout here.
I got the next superstar.
Yeah, which, that puts way too much pressure on the kids. And a lot of times those kids don't even like baseball. So,
Usually it's the loudest ones that don't that have the kid that don't like baseball.
oh, I could tell you about some of those meetings about, getting people getting angry because their kid wasn't getting playing time when he was 9.
It's like they have all the recommended level of play time. Everybody gets in the game.
So I think, the kids have it harder when their dad is a really good major league player than if he's just an average major league player.
Oh, yeah. And I think just to end this episode, it's the day before Father's Day. And I think I'm going to say what all of those kids would kind of say to their dad, because the only reason I love baseball as much as I do is because
I made you.
turned me into this.
I made you. You feel so bad now.
No, but so thank you for giving me the gift of baseball.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I love it. And I love that you love it too.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day.
Thanks.